was serving a lengthy prison term for kidnapping a provincial governor when demonstrators freed him during violent protests over alleged vote rigging by the government in October's parliamentary elections. Well, it was those protests a few months ago that brought down the government. Japarov became acting president, but then had to resign in November so he could run in this election. Japarov's campaign promises an end to corruption and infighting between various clans that's resulted in 3 revolutions in Kyrgyzstan in the last 15 years. A referendum was also held on constitutional changes initiated by Japarov to introduce a presidential system and reduce parliament's power. Early results there show 81% voted in favour. Charles Stratford reports now from the capital, Bishkek.
This is a monument to Kyrgyzstan's Soviet past, a reminder of a time before the beginnings of democracy, after the breakup of the Soviet Union 30 years ago. After months of political chaos, there are questions over what lies ahead on the journey towards good governance and rule of law. As people cast their ballots in presidential elections, one man who has dominated Kyrgyzstan's politics in recent months is at the forefront of voters' minds. His opponents say he is a threat to Kyrgyzstan's political future. His supporters say he is the country's only hope.
Sadr Japarov comes from ordinary people and he's very honest. He's a worthy candidate. His thoughts and speeches are close to the people.
This is Sadr Japarov after he was freed from jail by his supporters before they stormed the parliament building in protests after parliamentary elections in October. Those elections were annulled after widespread allegations of vote buying. Japarov describes himself as a conservative Kyrgyz nationalist. He says Kyrgyzstan's 10-year experience of a parliamentary system has failed. He wants to revert back to a presidential system, which his critics say is a threat to democratic progress and would give him additional power if, as expected, he becomes president. Japarov's support base comes from Kyrgyzstan's rural population who have suffered decades of economic and political neglect. His critics are often keen to point out that this deeply politicized country has overthrown 3 presidents in revolutions in the last 30 years, and their opinions often come with a warning.
Our society is mature enough and highly politicized, whoever wins the election. It is quite difficult to stop open democratic processes. People have woken up. They cannot be stopped. The point is, how politically mature will the leader be, and how will he work?
Some analysts say the democratic evolution of Kyrgyzstan will continue, but more chaos cannot be ruled out.
I think this is not the end of democracy and democratization in Kyrgyzstan. This is more like a serious hiccup. The very supporters, the very people who brought these people into power are not going to be waiting for that long to deliver proper governance. And with this sort of constitutional reform and this sort of power centralization, it's not going to work out.
The Central Election Commission says that with more than 95% of votes counted, Sadr Japarov has won the presidential election. It also says that in the constitutional referendum, there's been a convincing yes to a return to some form of presidential system of governance. Now, Japarov's supporters will be pleased with both outcomes, but his critics will say the journey towards democracy has been delayed again. Charles Stratford, Al Jazeera, Bishkek.
Well, Kubat Kasimbekov is a journalist for Radio Free Europe. He joins us via Skype from the Kyrgyz capital, Bishkek. We've mentioned it, but it's worth saying again, it was only a few months ago that he was in prison for kidnapping a political opponent. How do you explain Sadr Japarov's extraordinary rise to power?
Japarov now has strong support in every corner of the country. People, including my relatives, for example, see him as a political martyr or a political hero, which suffered a lot during the previous governments. And as we know, Japarov lost both his parents and his son when he was serving his nearly 12-year prison sentence. And furthermore, Japarov's calls to nationalize the country's largest gold mine, Kumtor, back in 2012, brought him some fame, yes. And at the same time, there are another group of people and politicians who challenge Japarov's background, for example. They pointed how Japarov worked as the head of the Corruption Prevention Agency in Kyrgyzstan during the reign of the former president Kurmanbek Bakiyev. So there are different opinions about Japarov in the society, and mostly, I guess, a lot of people have sympathy towards Japarov because of what he had to experience for last several years.
What does that mean for the referendum on strengthening the role of the presidency at the expense of the parliament?
Actually, this topic has been discussed in the society for a long time, yes, and there always used to be supporters of the strong presidential system and also supporters of the parliamentary system. But today's results mean that Kyrgyzstan will have a strong presidential system, and Japarov will have sweeping powers. And also, I should say that there are 2 points of view in the Kyrgyz society on this topic. One part of the society, mostly scholars, oppositional politicians, civil activists, believe that the government's latest actions, including the proposal of the new draft of constitution, yes, are very much concerning, and they think that Kyrgyzstan will soon have a strong presidential system.
I mean, how do you gauge the divide? Is it 50-50 or is the majority? Because this was really one of the things that made Kyrgyzstan quite unique in the region, the fact that it had this, there's this fierce political competition, but nonetheless there is political plurality in this parliamentary system. Now, this could be about to change in favour of a lot of power being concentrated in the hands of one person for possibly a very long time.
I wouldn't say that it is like 50-50, yes, because today's results show that majority of the Kyrgyz voters prefer presidential system. And according to the some survey, I guess a survey conducted by Central Asian Barometer before the election, I think around 80% actually of total voters were going to support the presidential system. But some politicians and also civil activists are saying that people didn't have enough time maybe or information to make a proper choice or to think about the choice that they are making. And also I should say that the last 2 parliaments actually really frustrated people, and people, a lot of voters associate parliamentarism with what we had in last 2 years in the parliament, what kind of people we had in the parliament. So this is why I guess there are such opinions in the society.
Thank you very much. Kubat Kasimbekov joining us there from Bishkek in Kyrgyzstan.